Welcome to the All Things Admin Tech Crash Course. My name is Suzanne Bird-Harris. On behalf of the All Things Admin team, welcome. We are excited to have all of you joining us for today's presentation. The Admin Tech Crash Course is a technology-focused training program for busy professionals. Our goal with each session is to create a crash course on the relevant technology topics you need to stay current on the technology and software you use each day so you can be more productive and proficient in everything you do. Let me introduce today's webinar. Learn Microsoft Word 2013 Mail Merge. And this is part one of a two-part series. Today we'll be covering Mail Merge Made Easy, presented by one of our favorite technology instructors, Donna Gilliland of Most Training. Donna's career in technology began back when DOS was the king of computer operating systems for the personal computer. Floppies were actually floppy, and the internet had just begun to explode. At the time, her career, there were no training companies. You either learned it on your own or you went back to school to learn it, and Donna did both. Donna's career in the corporate world started as an executive assistant. She worked in a programming department supporting a staff of programmers and the VP of IT, but that was just the beginning. Over time, she realized that she had an aptitude for learning software technologies and the ability to communicate to others in terms that all could understand. Her love of helping people, business, and technology made a great fit for her future career in training. Today, Donna is an award-winning technology instructor, certified technology trainer, and president of Most Training. Please join me in a warm virtual welcome for Donna Gilliland. Good morning, well, afternoon, Donna.
Well, it may be good morning some places,
Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon your geographic location. And so I'm excited to be here like I always am. And so as described, this is starting from the beginning. And hopefully if you have performed mail merges, maybe this will be a good refresher for you. It never hurts to have a refresher. But if you are joining because you need to learn how to perform mail merges, well, either way, you're in the right place. So we'll get started with going over terminology, because when you are at a ground zero on learning a concept, you certainly need to get the terminology out of the way as well. So now mail merging by definition is, very simply put, it's the combining of two files together. So in a mail merge, you're always going to have two files, and what Microsoft calls that in Word is a main document and a data source. Well, main document simply means that could be a letter. It could be that you're doing labels, but it is the document that you use that is the basis for the merge. It may be a form letter such as what you see on my screen, and on that form letter you may be merging it with names and addresses that may exist in different file types. Could be an Access database, a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. You could even have names and addresses in a Microsoft Word document as long as it was laid out as a table, but a little bit more about that coming up. But the main thing right now is the definition of a mail merge, which you've received, and knowing that there are two files involved. Step one in the process would be either starting with a blank document, such as a letter that you're going to type, and you may already have the names and addresses somewhere else as previously described. So I could start with a blank document and start my letter, and then when the letter is complete, then begin the process of merging the names and addresses, which I might have 100 of those, and then the end result would be 100 letters that say the same thing but addressed to different people. Now, or you may already have your form letter, like I do on the screen right now, and then you could have that open before you begin the merge process. So now, with that said, you start this from the mailings ribbon. So as you see up above, as I click on the mailings ribbon, as you look, there is a group that says Start Mail Merge, and in the Start Mail Merge, there is a button for that, Start Mail Merge, and when you click, you have a variety of options, and the ones that you will learn in your session today is about letters, which is what I have on the screen now, Email messages, you will learn that in part 2, and you will learn about envelopes and labels. So those are the 3 that we focus on today. So I'm going to start with letters. Now, I want you to keep in mind that when you look at this list and you look at the bottom, there is an option that says step-by-step mail merge wizard. And I want to mention this one because if any of you in the audience are coming from older versions of Microsoft Word and you had performed merges there, and maybe you're here today to learn how to do it in the newer versions. In the older versions, we had a wizard that we were provided, and the wizard would appear in a pane, a task pane on the far right, and then the wizard would take you through each step that was involved in the merge. So if you like that old way, that's a way that you used to use, well, you still can. So I just wanted to mention that to you. But today, I'm going to focus on you doing this without the mail merge wizard from the previous versions so you can get current on utilizing it from the ribbon. So that's what we're going to do. So here, if I chose letters, just so you see, I'm just letting the program know that I am working with a letter, although I could have just started with the process of selecting the recipients list, which is where the names and addresses are. But before I do that, I want to make certain again that you're understanding a term such as data source, because I'll be using that off and on. If your data source isn't already in place, you can create a data source on the fly. You can do that by selecting the recipients button. So here, if you select recipients, here are your choices. Type a new list, use an existing list, or to choose from Outlook contacts, which you will do in Part 2's mail merge. We will do a mail merge using Microsoft Outlook. So here, if you chose type a new list, and this part of your learning, there is more to learn about the type a new list, and that will also be upcoming in Part 2. But having said that, clicking type a new list is going to bring up a dialog box that says new address list, and this is a table that you can create, and what you're really doing or can do is create an access database on the fly without really having any knowledge. So here, by way of a quick review, the new address list gives you a table with generic names, title, first name, last name, etc. And then there's a scroll bar at the bottom, and when you scroll, it shows you all of the other fields that are defaults to you creating a new list on the fly. Now, what you're not learning today is how you can create the new list and edit the fields, and we'll do that in your Part 2. But the instruction piece as far as this moment in time is to be aware that when you choose select recipients, you can create a new list in a table, and it can be saved as an access database. But you'll learn more about that. So we're going to, today, we're using what's already created. We are going to use an existing list. So I'll choose use an existing list. And now when you choose that option, you're going to be placed in a default location called My Data Sources. Now I'm working with Microsoft Word 2013, so if you're working with maybe a version lower, a couple lower perhaps, it might be a different directory, but it will more than likely be a data sources directory. And I've placed my database here for simplicity's sake, but if the file that you're using that has your names and addresses, whether that is an Access, an Excel, or a Microsoft Word table, you'll simply have to browse your directory and find where your file is that you need to connect to your letter or to your labels, whatever the case may be. So I do have an Access database, and I'm double clicking. And what I've done is to choose edit recipient list. Because I've done this before on the screen earlier today, what you didn't see was a dialog box where you could choose what table to work with. So here's the side note. If you are a user of Microsoft Access databases, or even if you're not, if you are attaching to an Access database and the database has more than one table, then you would have to choose which table in your database that has the names and addresses you want to work with. So what you're seeing here is I simply brought up the Edit Recipient List, the option here where it says Start Mail Merge, back up on the ribbon again. This button that says Edit Recipient List is what I clicked in order to get the list of names that are in that Access database that I chose to connect the letter to. So now, as you look at my list, you can see that everything is chosen. And over on the left, the reason why it says Canada Tourist is because that's the name of the Access database that I am working with. And you'll learn more about this full list down to sorting, filtering, etc. In Part 2. So here, if you want to, and this would be the case even if you were working with Excel, if you have a large list of names and addresses and there are certain ones in your list that you don't want the letter to go to or to create a label for, whatever the type of merge is that you're doing, then you can deselect those that you don't want to be part of the merge simply by clicking. I'll go ahead and reselect these. Now, in a very large list, that can be timely, having to go through the list and deselecting, which is why at the very top, when you look at the field names, there are down arrows. And so for example, if I click on last name, just the heading, not the down arrow, just the heading, then it will be ordered in either ascending or descending. So click once, it's ascending. Click again, it's descending. Or if you were doing this mail merge based upon, say, zip codes, or which might even be the case when you're printing labels, then keep in mind that every one of these headings in the edit mode will let you reorder the information, which may be easier for you to then work from there to deselect what you don't want as part of the merge. So I'll go ahead and leave these as they are and click on OK. So now by way of quick review, and then I'm moving on into more, and that's the mail merge itself coming up, is that two files, the main document, such as a letter, which is what we have, and then the file that you want to connect to that has the names and addresses, thus the term Select Recipients on the button in the Start Mail Merge. So now, the next step in the process was to see, so far you are at step 2. Step 1 was having the file open, like the letter. Step 2 is to connect it to the names and addresses file. And step 3 would be to start inserting the merge fields that you want in the document. Now there are 3 that are in the group called Write and Insert Fields. I'll spotlight that for you. So here we go. I'm still on the mailings ribbon, but over on the right is Write and Insert Fields. And we're going to cover why you want to use address block, greeting line, versus, say, insert merge field. The address block is an easy way for you to pull in the, say, the first name, last name, street address, city, state, zip. It's going to pull in these fields based upon the field names that are in your recipient file. For example, let me go back to Edit Recipient List for you. This Edit Recipient List, as you can see, this is an Access database that is utilizing the same field names that the address block is programmed to look for. That's an important point for you to keep in mind, because the address block is pre-programmed to look for field names called last name, first name, title, address line 1, city, state, I'm just scrolling through for you to see it, zip code, and then this particular table has a field that is not a default field that's been added to this list. So the address block, if your fields have these names coming from your source file, then you don't have to go through the step-by-step of the insert merge to bring these in. I'll show you what I mean so it'll make more sense. But keep this in mind too. I don't want you to think that, oh, well, I've got to go back to my Microsoft Excel file, if that's the case, and change those headings to match up to what Word's looking for when I use the address block. You don't necessarily have to do that, because in part 2, I'm going to teach you how you can connect those fields that don't have the same names so that the address block will look for the field names that you have in your file. But for now, coming back to this right insert fields, there's a button that says Insert Merge Field, and when you click that button, you are provided with a list of all the field names that exist in the file that you connected to the letter, in this case, a letter. And rather than have to click title and then press the space bar and bring in first name and press the space bar, you get the idea. These fields match up to what address block looks for in this particular database that I have. So now I can make it easy on myself. I'm coming down to the line below the date and choosing address block. And when you choose address block, you will receive a dialog box that shows you how the address would be brought in. It would bring in the title first there, and the preview shows Mr. James Britt, which is a sample, and showing you that the street address would be second, city, state, zip code. Now, as you look over on the left, it says insert recipient's name in this format, and it's chosen the format for you, but you can choose differently from the list. And it's the match fields in the lower right corner that you'll learn about in part 2. All right, but this is good to go, and I'll click on OK, and address block comes in. Then from here, I would need to make the necessary returns that I would want in the format of the letter, and then the greeting line. Well, there's a button for greeting line, and the field greeting line pops up, and it's set to use the more formal, which is the word dear, and then it will pull the title, what's in the title field of this database, and it will pull the last name. And then as you look on down at the bottom, it says Dear Mr. Britt, comma. And from here you could change what you needed to. And for example, up above, if you wanted it to be a colon rather than a comma. So as you look at the top where it says Dear Mr. Randall as the example, to the far right, the comma is the default, but when you click the down arrow, you can choose colon. So it depends upon whether you're going formal or informal. Now after you click on OK, the greeting line field comes in, and now you know what 3 parts it's going to pull from this particular file. The double, well, actually they're called chevrons, so when you see what looks like a less than symbol and a greater than symbol in double, those are actually called chevrons. And as you look at this, this is how you know that this is not just text that someone typed, it is representative of a field code is what you have. So that's what we have so far. So just keep in mind that the address block is a combination of several fields that's coming out of that file. All right, so now that we've got this part done, if your file the names, the field names don't match up to what address block looks for, then you would need to use the insert merge field if you haven't learned how to do the match fields, which you will learn about in part 2. So here's how that would work. I'm going to take this address block out, field, make a space for it, place for it. So here, if your field names didn't match up in a way that you could use address block, then you would have to come to the insert merge field button and see yours. Yours might say first and last, and it might say street address, and then the second one might say suite number. That might be what your fields are coming out of your file. So if they didn't match up to address block, you'll have to manually bring them in. And this is how that would work. Insert merge field, choosing the first one I want, and then comes the title, which is the field, and then I would have to press the space bar, insert merge field again, first name, space, bar, last name. So that might be Mr. John Smith or Mrs. Sally Jones, and then pressing the enter key. And I'm going to stop here for a moment just because the double spacing is not what I want. And if this happens to you, this is a side note, but you'll find it helpful. It may be your default settings for line spacing. So if that happens, what I'm doing is just selecting this area, and I'm returning to going to the home ribbon, and this after spacing is controlled in the paragraph group. So I'm on the home ribbon. In the paragraph group is a small arrow in the lower right corner. So this is more of a side note, but I think you'll find it helpful if this is happening to you. And in the paragraph group, I can see that the after value is set to 10 point, and I want mine at 0. And I want just a single line. There we go. Now when I press enter, see, I won't have that extra line. All right, back to the goal, which are the mail merge fields. So back to mailings. Now back to mailings in the right and insert merge field, and I want to bring in address line 1. And I have a side note for you while I'm thinking about it. When we have a file with names and addresses, some people have a street address and then a suite number. Some addresses will have a street address but no suite number. So if this were a list of fields and suite number was one of the fields, and then I plug that in, when the merge happens, when you actually perform the merge, you don't have to worry about the fact that some addresses might not have the suite number. There will be no blank line left as a result. In the merge, Microsoft Word will close up the line where there was no relative suite number if that was one of the additional fields you were using. All right. I've got my same issue here. Let me fix this. And then we'll put city, state, and zip after I adjust this line spacing. All right, so back to mailings. Insert merge field, and you can see how it's really a repetitive process. So city, but don't forget to put your comma and then your space, and then I'll plug the rest of these in. You get the idea. So there are the codes. That's why it would be helpful to you if your fields match up to address block, or if you matched address block up to your field names, because it would be less time. Now moving down into the letter, and I'm going to enlarge my screen for you. Here I'm going to put in so keep in mind that you may have a letter that has one area that the information is going to be different for each person. It could be, in this case, this letter's going out to people who attended an event, but they attended on different dates. and or maybe it is a form letter that you're sending, and it's a travel date, and that travel date is different for each of the receivers of the letter. Well, the placeholder I have here is just a visual for me. So if I've created a form letter, it's just giving me a visual that this is a place where I need to insert that specialized field that has that different date for each person. And before I do that, just to refresh your memory, going back to the edit recipient list, and I'll scroll over in the fields and see how this database has a travel date field. Each one of these, in my case, it's actually an attending date, but this one says travel date. It's a practice file that I use. So I'm just going to select over the X that I used as a placeholder, insert merge field, and I would plug in the field that was applicable. And then in the merge, it will go from record to record to record, and each person would have a different date because it's referenced in that database, or it could be an Excel file. Now, once you have plugged in everything, then you'll want to preview your merge because you want to make certain that everything is going like you intended. And it's helpful to see what the data will look like once it's been inserted to a document instead of only, viewing the merge field names, which is what you're viewing now. So you can easily preview how the mail merge will appear before you finish it. And you can do that by using, from the mailings ribbon, in the preview results, there's a button that says preview results. So let's go ahead and I'll click. Now look back at my screen, and I'm seeing a preview of how it would look. So I see that the names are coming in correctly, spacing, city, state, and then in the letter I can see that where I had my X, I now have a date. Then as you have it in preview, looking back at the mailings ribbon, in the preview results, you can see that there is a way for you to go from record to record. Right now it's set to a 1, but the arrow to the right would let me go to the next record, and I am, if you look, I'm now at Susan's record, and then to the next one is Jane, etc. So this allows you to do a little scanning through first to ensure that everything looks correct. And then the buttons, the arrows, triangles that have a vertical line, there's one at the left to go to the first record, and there's one at the right to go to the last record. You can also check for errors in the preview results, and when I choose check for errors, there are 3 options. The first option is to simulate the merge and report any errors in a new document. The default is to complete the merge, pausing to report each time that the program sees something that it thinks is an error, or just to complete the mail merge without any pausing and let you know if there were any issues. But most of the time I'm good with going through this method of doing a spot check by going to the next record. Then just beneath is an option to find a recipient. That Find Recipient button lets you search for a specific recipient. So there may be a reason for that. Maybe you're not quite sure that you recorded the correct date for that particular person, and you want to just go to that particular recipient. So when you click Find Recipient, a Find Entry box pops up, and then you can key in who you're looking for within this preview. There's an option to look in all the fields that were inserted or just a specific field. But you would have to type in, of course, who you were looking for. I'll cancel that out. Now, once you've gone through the preview and things look right to you, then you can finish the merge. You have a button for that in the preview results. When you click Finish and Merge, you have three choices. Edit individual documents. Now that is going to put the results of the mail merge in a new document. And then you could print it like you would, of course, any other document. Then there's the option to print documents, and that's going to merge your records, and it's going to send those letters directly to the printer. And then there's an option to send email messages, which is best for Microsoft Outlook contacts, and you'll learn how to do that in Part 2. Before I go further with this, though, you have to make a decision as to whether or not you want your results, your mailing result, to be in a document or send on to the printer. And one thing before I do that is, if you want to make any type of change, like I saw a mailing, a typo here. Now, going back up on Finish the Merge and the tip I want to give you. Most of the time when I'm doing a form letter, I don't know about for you, but most of the time when I'm doing a form letter, I don't necessarily want to have a new document and then save that document, because that letter may be to different people in the future. For example, I used to work for an organization where we had volunteers for this huge event, a nonprofit event that we did every year, and we would have upwards of 2,500 volunteers helping us with this huge event that took most of the year to plan. So each year, of course, at the end of the event, we wanted to send thank you letters to everyone. So I might not have the same 2,500 volunteers the next year. So I'm just simply saying you may not want it to be in a document by itself, because you're not planning to save the document. In the future, if you wanted to send it again, you could remerge it. So those are the options. Edit individual documents, you get a new document, and then print document sent on to the printer. I'll go ahead and choose the option Edit Individual Documents, because you need to see what happens before it puts it into a separate document for you. There is the option to merge all records, and notice that the dialog box itself at the top, it says merge to new document. So there is the option to merge all records, just the current record, or from a specific record number to another. But I'll go ahead and go with the default, which is all. And then as you look at my screen, you might think, well, I didn't see anything change, but you'll have to look up at the top of the screen to see that it has. I'm going to bring up the spotlight here. See at the top, it generically says letters 1. And so I do have a completely new document that has all these letters. And if you look down at the bottom left of my screen, it says that this is page 1 of 7. So there are 7 letters that were created. It's in a new document that could be saved if that was something you needed to do. It depends upon what your goal is. And then by way of review, I'm going back to mailings. And then if you needed to, again, to edit your recipients, if you are on mailings and you see in Start Mail Merge that the edit recipient list is grayed out, it's because at this point you're not in the merged document. You now have a brand new document. So that's why that button is dimmed out. I'll come down to the bottom, and I'm coming back to the original letter that we were practicing with, and this is the letter that we were practicing with earlier. And so I've completed that merge. All right, next up is going to be, I'm going to close a few of these things down. Next up is us doing labels. So I'll close this one. And that's what we're going to do next is labels. Also, one other note while I'm thinking about it is that when you have a data source attached, you may edit that data source and you would want to refresh your data source when you make a change. Let me go ahead and reconnect that. Select recipients, and I'm going to choose use an existing list. Choose Canada Tourist again, and I'll go back to the edit recipient list. So the point that I want to make is just that if you make changes to your list, which you can do, there would be a refresh button under the data source box to update the recipient list. You'll learn a lot more about that in the coming session. All right, so let's do labels. And I'll close this file. All right. It all starts the same. You'll start with mailings. Now when you get to mailings, again, the start mail merge, but this time it's going to be labels. Now once you choose labels, the dialog box appears for you to choose which label type you want. So now if you use Avery labels, or if you're like me and I want to get the budget version, I buy the generic version of Avery labels. But the bottom line to it all is this: every box of labels we buy has a stock number, and you'll have to know what that number is because you're choosing that from this list of label options. Now in my case, I'm going to use the Avery label 5160, and when you click the mailing label product number, over on the right you are shown what the height and width and paper size is of that particular label. So that's the first one, is that you have to choose your product number for the label. Then you can follow with OK. And then what you will have are your labels, and this is a table. And here's another side note for you. If you are a person that works with tables a lot, if you ever turn off the grid and you go to create labels, you may think that nothing's happened because you can't see the grid. It may just be a blank document because you've turned off the grid. For example, in the labels, if you look up at the top of my screen, it says Table Tools because it's actually a table when you create the labels, and there's a design ribbon and a layout ribbon. So based upon the side note I'm giving you, on the layout ribbon, if you don't have this grid line, make certain you go to the layout ribbon and look in the table group and turn on View Grid Lines, because that can happen to you when you go back and forth between tables and you've turned off the grid lines for various reasons. All right, so now back to working with the mailing label. Just like with the form letter, you have to connect it to a data source. And we'll choose Select Recipients from the Start Mail Merge. And I am using an existing list. And then what comes up is a field code first. This is very important because you and I, we're going to have to add some other fields, but it's important to know why you're getting this field called Next Record. This field, when we actually execute the merge, this is a field code that the program will use to go and grab the next record, the next record, and the next record in order to get all your names and addresses that are in your Excel or your Access database, whatever the case might be. So that's going to be there immediately when you connect that file. Now the first label will be empty because it will be your starting point, or the label that you will use to plug in all the fields that you want to retrieve from your data source file. So again, if you have matched your fields from your file, then address block can be used. Now in my case, I can use address block because my fields match up to what's already here, but if it didn't, you would have to do what I showed you earlier, insert mail merge, and then you would start plugging in those fields where they needed to be with appropriate spacing, commas were applicable, like as in between city and state, so you would go through that same process. But in my case, I am going to be using the address block, and up comes the same screen you saw earlier, waiting for you to verify that this is the format you intended. And then click on OK, and I get the address block. Now here's a very important part that is often overlooked. Every one of these labels has to have that field called address block. But you're not going to go to every single label and plug that in. There's a button that will do it for us, a button that will do it for us. So as you look back in the write and insert fields, now that address block is here, there's a button that says update labels. When you click update labels, look back again at my screen, and you can see that every label except for the first label will have address block field added to the next record field. So just remember that you'll have to choose update labels for it to have that field. And then you would continue as you would if it were a letter in the preview results, or let's start with the button, for example, on the left. Choosing preview results would let us look at our labels, and as I look at it, I can see that it's got more spacing that I want, so you would correct all of those before you continue. I'll leave mine as is for the time's sake, but now you see it in preview. And there's still that option to find recipient. And don't forget that when you do these labels, that might be that there are certain ones that you don't want to do a mailing label for. So that would mean going back to Start Mail Merge Group here and choose Edit Recipient List so that you can deselect the ones that you don't want. And in addition, there's another little feature here at the bottom, because you're just getting this quick overview of this mail merge dialog box, but there's also an option to choose to find duplicates, because you may have inherited an Access database or an Excel spreadsheet, and you may have exported information from, say, a database into an Excel spreadsheet. You want to check for duplicates so that you don't print duplicate labels. So just know that that's what that option is there for. And then, of course, as I said before, you can deselect. Another good thing, too, about on the mailing labels, and I haven't had to do bulk mailings in forever, so you'll have to keep me up to date on this one. But as I recall, there was a time, and maybe it's still so, where if you got bulk mail rates, if you grouped mailings together by zip code. So if that still applies, that's another reason why you would want to come to this field, and I could click the zip code, and everything would be in order by zip code. At least in numerical, yes, in numerical order by zip code. And then from there, I'll go ahead and click on OK. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but my labels did change because I reordered them by zip code. So once you've gone through checking to make certain everything looks as it should, this one's really easy for us to determine because there are only 7 labels, but you could have 500 or more. Then you could choose the finish and merge. Now, again, you learned what these 3 options are, but see, now this is one of those cases where I would want to have, and it would vary according to my situation, but or my need rather, the labels. You may want your labels to be a new document and then save those labels, that document, so that you could print those labels when you need them. So if you're doing mail outs to the same groups of people on a routine basis, then this would be a prime example of why you would want it to become its own new document and then save that document. And then in the future, when you wanted to print those same groups of labels, you would just bring up the document rather than repeat the mail merge. So I'll go ahead and choose edit individual documents versus print documents, because as stated before, print documents is going to merge it and send it right to the printer. But I'm going to choose edit individual documents, and right now my file name just generically says document 2 at the top, but I'll choose edit individual documents, and I do want them all to be merged into a new document. And then as you look at my screen, you just looking at it on the surface, you'll think nothing's happened, but if you look back up at the top of my screen, it says labels 2. That's the generic name that Word has given to my new document that now contains names and addresses on labels. And at this point, you could save your file for reuse. Now, I have a few things like that myself within my work, that I keep certain labels printed, and then when I've exhausted those, I just reopen that file that has those names and addresses and then print them again. All right, so I'm going to close this file. Get back to my mouse pointer. All right, here we go. So I'll close this one. And now closing that one, I'm just back to the original one that I had created, and it says document 2 at the very top. And I'll close this one. Now I'm going to start with a brand new document for this to get you started with the type a new list feature that I gave you a quick layout of earlier to show you how that works. And I also want to close with doing an envelope as well. So let me first go over a little bit more about creating a list on the fly, and knowing that you'll get more detail in a second webinar, and then we'll finish out with envelopes. So be thinking of your questions while I wrap us up to the 1 o'clock mark. Going back to mailings, and right now I'm on a blank screen, a blank document, so it would be me typing the letter and then getting ready to connect it to names and addresses. But I'll choose select recipients, and I'll go back to the type a new list to give you a little bit more information about that. When you saw it earlier, you can see that you have these default field names already. And I can just start creating names and addresses on the fly and use this file. So here for title, I'm going to put in Mrs. And I'm just tabbing from field to field. I won't finish this out. And you'll go from field to field. But if you look down at the bottom left, especially this is important to you if you've never used this layout. Once the first record's in, down in the lower left is a button for new entry, and that would give you a new record. And so all you would be doing is working, someone may have given you a list of names and addresses that you don't have in an electronic file yet. So this is allowing you to create it on the fly, and then once saved, you would have it for future use. Now, if you, for example, did not like the field names that are chosen for you by default, that's why down at the bottom you have a button. The bottom of this dialog box, you have a button that says Customize Columns. And when you click Customize Columns, then you can rename these columns and or remove field names that you won't be using in this file. So if I wanted to rename, it would be a matter of clicking on the field name and over on the right choosing rename. And for any field I don't want to use in this table, then you can remove it from the list. And you can also add fields. For example, I might want to add a field for at so far. And as you can see, it added it below the field that I had selected at the time. And then to remove the field is to simply click it and choose delete. You're asked to confirm, and then you can remove everything else that you don't need. So that's your quick, look into creating the addresses on the fly. I'll go ahead and put in one more here. I won't finish out these fields and click on OK. Now, when you are creating this list on the fly and you click on OK, this will default to an Access database type file. If you look at my screen at the bottom, it's of course waiting for a file name for you to provide, but you'll notice that it says Save as Type Microsoft Office Address List. And this will become, I'll go ahead and put what this is. And it does default to a specific directory. In my case, it's My Data Sources. You would have to pick a different location if you don't want it to go to the default. And I'm just getting this message because I'm already using these, the text that I have a conflict with a field that I'd already started using. So that is a quick look at creating a list on the fly, but you'll get a detailed look in our part 2. Let me get to our envelopes for us. Do you remember the first time you ever created a mail merge? Did you do it without instruction? It can, some parts of it are intuitive and some parts aren't. So I'll go back to mailings and start a mail merge and envelopes. And from there, it's the same as it has been for us. You have to identify certain things. For example, here, the envelope size, which starts with the number 10, and then, of course, the names and addresses, the delivery address. Do you want a different font? Where do you want it placed? From the left, from the top, everything's set to automatic, but it's all changeable. See, for example, I can choose from the left that it come over from the left by 1 inch, which I've changed it to 1 inch. And then you can change the font. So these are all preliminary things that you want to do in terms of the look and the spacing for the envelope. And then printing options would be you choosing how your envelope feeds into the printer. So, and you're probably familiar with that part already. That's not so much the mail merge as it is the case with any envelope that you're creating, envelope document. So I'll go ahead and choose OK. My screen's going to change to landscape because I'm in a number 2 envelope, and it repeats over the steps that you and I have done twice before, only we did it with a letter, we did it once with labels. It's still the same thing. You're still going to have to connect to an address list. And then, of course, everything else would be the same in the previewing and then the merging as one if you wanted it to be a new document, and then saving those envelopes. So that puts us right at top of the hour, just about, give or take a minute or two. And I hope that if you have not done mail merges before, that you feel like you can go back and do this now. And then if you're here for a refresher, hopefully you picked up a few things. And then we are going to get into advanced aspects of mail merging in part 2, because not everything goes smooth. Not every data source file is set up the right way. We have to compensate for that. Or if you're merging from a Microsoft Excel data source and there are numbers in the field. Sometimes things don't come over the right way, and I'll be teaching you how to compensate for those type things in an advanced mail merge. All right, I'm ready to take questions if there are any.
Yeah, sorry, I had to find my mute button. We have one question from, I don't know if Eloise.
Yes,
We asked it
Eloise?
fairly early on.
Okay.
And it is, can you redo a letter previously merged? So I'm guessing it sounds to me like you may have covered that, but that was the question.
Well, if what I interpret that to mean is that you've already merged the letter, and if after you've merged the letter, and I'm assuming it's been merged into a document, so if you merged it into a document, then your change needs to be made from the original document. In other words, the mail merge version, that wouldn't automatically update. I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I would guess the same, Donna.
Now, did any other questions, or did anyone learn anything new? Was it a good refresher?
Feel free to type in the question box, y'all.
Or did today reinforce that you really know what you're doing? That's always good, just to be reinforced. And while you're typing in your questions, if you have more, this level of training is needed to be able to really work with Part 2 as well. Because when we dive into Part 2, the assumption is that you know how to do merges, and now you're trying to compensate for things like you want to use the address block button, but your fields aren't the same names as what address block looks for, and how to match those up so you can use that button to expedite getting those fields in, how to compensate for issues that occur with Excel spreadsheets and numbers that are in, especially dates.
Right.
And also being able to set up your mail merge so that you're prompted for information. So you'll get into a much higher level of learning in Part 2. Although this is a lot. I mean, what you covered today is a lot.
That's for sure, particularly if it's brand new to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I remember the first time. Don't you? First time that you ever had to do a mail merge.
Oh Lord, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it can be pretty daunting trying to figure out how you get those names and addresses from one file to another. It's not completely intuitive.
Well,
Any other questions?
Well, not a question, but a comment. Terry says, thank you. I'm anxious for Part 2, as I used to use the wizard because the manual part was confusing at first. So.
Oh, it was. I agree with you, Terry. Because I come from, using the wizard, and then I feel just like you do. Whenever the new version came out and it was working with the ribbon, then at first that was a little confusing. I think it's just because, Terry, we got used to using the wizard.
Oh gosh, we've had several more in here. My little box is teeny, teeny, teeny. So Patricia says, good refresher, not too sure of knowing what I'm doing, smile. We'll be participating in Part 2. Thanks, Patricia
Good.
from Atlanta. So that's awesome. And
we're almost next door neighbors, Patricia.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I'm in Alabama.
Just a little spit and a hop, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
And Andrea says it reinforced and also helped show me how to do mail merge. Did you set up mail merge with both envelope and letter in the same document?
Well, you could. Okay. Here's what you could do: is if you're going to do an envelope for those letters, then you could get your mail merge done, for the letters, and then from there just create envelopes.
Right. Right. Well, that is all of the questions and comments so far, and
well, I hope it was helpful.
Well, absolutely. I can tell you that I'm pretty much considering that those questions and comments pretty much assure that it was helpful. That's for sure.
Good.
So, all right. Well, I'm going to swipe back the screen here.
All right. I'm looking for it to. There we go. So you now have control.
Yeah. All righty. So, as with any crash course, our goal today was to arm you with the tools and strategies you need to take back to your computer to implement what you've learned. But it does require you to be committed to the implementation process. So we encourage you to find ways to immediately implement what you've learned today, share it with a colleague, and review it again tomorrow. That's the best way to ingrain what you have learned today into your permanent memory, and you'll be able to use it to save precious time for years to come. We want to thank each and every one of you for investing your time and energy to join us for this presentation. On your screen now, you should see All Things Admin, our web address, our social media outposts, as well as Donna's mosttraining.com website and ways to connect with her on social media as well. And that's it. That's a wrap for us today. Thanks again for participating. And part 2 will be next Tuesday, the 12th. And as Donna said, we will be diving in eyeball deep into MailMerge next week. So that's going to be fun. So thank you all. Have a great, great week. And hopefully we'll see you back next week.